the holiday today, or yesterday for you, commemorates the Buddha teaching, the Four Noble Truths, which is kind of encapsulated in the last two verses that we did from the Lamrim glance meditation that we've been studying. So I thought I'd just mention that, remind you. We talked about Ledang Nyomong Balong Draktutuk Dugnel Sungi Chusem Mampose Tame Chikrun Siso Chembole Tado Shukja Kepa Jingilob. So verse 87. There you go. If I said it in Tibetan, you might didn't recognize it. There you go. So this is talking about, it said, Ledang Nyomong Balong Dakrutuk. So agitated, or what does it say here? Violently tossed by waves of karma and afflictions. Ledang Nyomong. So this is talking about the second noble truth, the cause of suffering. Dugnel Sungi Chusen Mampose. This is talking about the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. And Tame Jikrun Siso Chempole. I seek this Tardo Shukja Kepa Jingilo. You almost have to put the two lines together to say it in English, because it almost starts from the end. Grant me blessings to, please grant me blessings to develop an intense desire to be free from this great ocean of this great fearful and endless ocean. So we talked a little bit about that, how samsara is this analogy here when we talk about the first two noble truths. Samsara like an ocean, like a great body of water, and the sufferings that inhabit it are like these sea monsters of three different kinds, talking about the three different kinds of suffering. And then we talked about the next verse, Soka Sonra Drawa Koadi. Soka means difficult to endure. Sonra means prison. Dawa means like. So this prison-like, difficult to endure, prison-like samsara. Korwa means samsara. Gawe selta tongwe lopang ne. Having given up the attitude that sees this samsara that's so difficult to endure, like a prison, having given up the attitude that sees it as a pleasure garden. Labsum means the three trainings, the three higher trainings. Pakpe norgi zozungte tarpe gelsen simparjingilob. Please grant me blessings to hold the victory banner of liberation by holding the treasury of the Aryas, the three higher trainings. So this is talking about, this last verse is talking about the way to train the mind in how to train in the path that leads to liberation. So that was what we were talking about there. And just to remind you, this is very important. You know, when you talk about because we're going to start talking about the Mahayana Path, the path of the person of great scope, great interest, Mahayana. In order to really understand the suffering of others, you have to understand the general nature of samsara in general. And so it's very logical that you would train the mind in the person of intermediate scope that wants to escape from cyclic existence. and understanding all of the, and even the lower scope, understanding the suffering of the lower realms in particular, but also the suffering of the upper realms. I've told this story before. The President Gandantipa, when he was visiting Deer Park in America, the center where I lived for many years, one time when he came to stay, and he was in one particular room that was dressed up, flowers and all sorts of nice things, comfortable chairs and bed and meditation area and everything. And someone said, "Oh, Rinpoche, is everything okay? Is this okay?" And he said, "Doesn't matter. It's all the same." All samsara. We tend to see samsara like a pleasure garden, capable of being like a pleasure garden. We'd rather not be in the garbage dump, but all of samsara is like a prison. It's the analogy that's given in the commentary by the Lama that we've been using says that the samsara is like the ocean, is like a prison. Samsara is like the prison in this case. The earlier analogy, it was like the ocean. And the prison guard is like the self-cherishing attitude, and by extension, the root of that, the cause of that, the original cause of that is the self-grasping mind. So that's what keeps us in the prison, not being able to escape from it. We don't recognize that. When we do recognize that, we have no wish to be here, no matter, even if you pretty everything up. I can't remember, there's some expression that was used in politics a couple of years ago, but I think it's a general expression about putting lipstick on a pig's mouth. So the implication being, even you try to beautify the pig, it's still a pig. So samsara, even you try to think, you try to make everything very comfortable and beautiful and wonderful, it's still of the nature of suffering. And getting complacent with that, striving for the pleasures of cyclic existence, is a state of mind that doesn't allow you to practice what needs to be practiced to get out of samsara, which is the 3 higher trainings. It is the higher training of ethical discipline, moral discipline, the higher training of concentration, and the higher training in wisdom. So that's where we had gotten last time. I remember, I think many of you are familiar with who we used to call Ken Rinpoche at Kopan, Lama Lundup, who passed away some years ago. Now your Geshe Chune is called Ken Rinpoche. When Lama Lundup was at Kopan many years ago, when I was there, Lama Yeshe, when I went into Geshe-la's room, to Lama Lundup's room, and it was kind of in disarray, texts all over the place, and not like a person in the West considers to be a neat room. And Lama said he doesn't care. His only view is to get out of cyclic existence. His only wish is to get out of cyclic existence. That doesn't mean that he was only a person of intermediate scope, but it meant that he wasn't concerned, just like great beings are not concerned with this prison-like cyclic existence. Okay, so today we're going to begin the next outline, which is how to train in the path of the great being, and that has 2 parts. The way to train in the Jangchu Dusem, how to train in bodhicitta, and having trained in bodhicitta, how to practice, how to train in its practices, which I guess would be like the 6 perfections and so forth. So the first one, how to train in bodhicitta, semke gi gel lob sul, and this is what we're talking about here. I'm going to have my glasses to be able to read it better. Oh, Gyu, how to train in the causes of generating bodhicitta, and semke ngula lobsul, how to train in the actual bodhicitta. So the causes of bodhicitta are what we're talking about first. So this is the verse that we're talking about here. Lamgi sawa ningje chempo tsulge. So how to train in great compassion, which is the root of the path. So this is the verse 89. Nyamdak droa dikun dagima yang yang dingi kyangpi susamne dupe bula sewe mashindu chomen ningje keba jing ilo. Having considered how all these miserable beings have been my mothers and have raised me with kindness again and again, I seek your blessings to develop effortless compassion like that of a loving mother for her precious child. So this is the verse that we now begin to make the transition from training in the person of intermediate scope to the person of great scope, the Mahayana. Nyamtak is an interesting word, the very thing where I think the translation we have here says miserable beings. Nyam means, can mean degenerate, can mean destitute, decline, and so forth. Nyamtak together means, tak means tied. So tied to decline, tied to ruin, or destitute. You know, when we say miserable beings, that's a pretty good one, I think. Sometimes people say, if you say pathetic beings, although that's a way to translate Nyamtak, that doesn't give the right ring to it, because we're thinking of Droa Dikun Dagi Ma. All of these have been my mother. Daki Ma. Ma means mother. All of these migrators that are tied to ruin, who are destitute, exhausted, tormented, helpless. So this resonates more if you've meditated on the previous stages of the path, where you understand the very nature of cyclic existence. All of the beings that we encounter, even if they look very prosperous and having a good time, they have all the resources that they need and so forth, they're tied to suffering. They're tied to ruin. They're destitute. They're miserable. Miserable maybe has the implication like they're always like sad or something, but it doesn't mean that. It means that they are in a pitiable state. All of these beings have been my mother. So in the commentary by Ngutru Dharmabhadra that I've been reading from, he breaks it up very interestingly. He says that when you say kun, Nyamdak Droa di kun, all these beings, that implies the initial preparatory meditation on compassion, which is equanimity. Because all of them, all beings equally, whether they seem to be suffering in the lower realms, whether they seem to be suffering as a human in various ways or seem to be more prosperous, all of these are under the influence of the 3 kinds of suffering. And in order to generate compassion for them, you have to first have a sense of equanimity toward them, equanimity between those that we consider in a favorable light, we might call friends. Those who are, we don't have, let's say the other extreme, those that we consider enemies or that we dislike or that we're not so pleased to see or to think about. And those that are in between, that maybe are strangers or we just don't care about one way or the other. We have to be able to equalize them by understanding how they are all equal as objects of practice of the Mahayana Path. So Dagima, those words have, all these have been my mother, or are my mother, have been my mother. This is the first stage of developing the cause of bodhicitta, which is great compassion, which is recognizing all sentient beings as having been our mother. Maybe you know there are two main methods to develop bodhicitta. One that comes from sort of Maitreya and the method side, and we'll have some more information about that later, that is called the 7 causes and effect. There's 6 causes and 1 effect. We said the 7 causes and effects. So the first of those causes, after equanimity, which is a preliminary, when we say Yamdak Droa Di Kun, Dagima, all of these have been my mother. To recognize that all sentient beings equally have been our mother is considered one of the most difficult realizations to make in the Lamrim. I mentioned it when we talked about the first verse on guru devotion. It said that the deep understanding of guru devotion also is the other, along with recognizing all sentient beings as having been our mother, the other super difficult realization to make. So in the course of time, our present mother in previous lives has been our mother before. Maybe not necessarily in the last life, although it's maybe in some cases, but certainly sometime in the past, over numberless rebirths in the past, our present mother has been our mother in the past. And then many times, sometime before that had been our mother again. Maybe many millions, billions, trillions, numberless lives before that had been our mother. But as you go back into infinite, regress in infinite time in the past, even our present mother has been our mother numberless times. But what about in between? Every single sentient being at some point has been our mother. And not just once, like our present mother, every sentient being has been our mother numberless times in the past. This is what's called mashe. She means so understanding that all sentient beings have been our mother. That's the first of the 6 causes that lead to the 7th result of bodhicitta. So yang dingi kyangpe sulsamne, contemplating, oh, that's clever, there you go. Contemplating the way in which they have raised me or taken care of me with kindness again and again. Yang means again and again. Raised me, kyang can mean raised or taken care of me or nurtured me and so forth. So this is the second of the meditations called remembering the kindness. Tinden. So how have the mothers been kind? Maybe you don't have problems with that. There's some people in the West that have trouble with thinking that our mothers are kind. They think our mothers, it's just been a pain, always causing problems for me. This is a very limited attitude because our mothers are the reason that we have this body. They've been kind in giving us this body, putting up with the hardships of giving birth, giving up pleasures, even in the months before that, planning, giving up their maybe the habits that they might like to engage in for their own pleasure. But while they're pregnant with us, they gave those up. Then when we're born, they endured that suffering for our sake. And even though we were like a worm when we first came out, we couldn't really do anything. They looked at us with kind eyes. They gave us, from the very beginning, they gave us nutrition from their own bodies, sometimes from their breast milk. They fed us. They gave us all sorts of pleasures like that. They educated us from the very beginning, even from the time of teaching us how to go to the toilet or to clean our hands or to be careful and so forth. They taught us, and as we grew older, they tended to our education, made sure we had the best schools and did our homework and everything, even if we didn't want to. And they gave us pleasures as we grew older. They made sure that we had everything that we needed, our books, and they gave up their own time and resources for that. So it's useful to spend some time on those two causes, and especially the preliminary cause. Lama Zopa Rinpoche has said in the past, the meditation on equanimity, how all living beings, all sentient beings, have been equally friend, enemy, and stranger. The reason for that, he said that to even spend your whole life just on that one, trying to make that one realization is incredibly powerful, because then with that basis of equanimity, seeing everyone in the same light, there are not certain people who you feel what we think of as love for, but is really biased. Someone because they say nice things about us or because they've treated us kindly. And those who are we presently consider to be enemies, very difficult to feel kind toward, to feel affection for. So first, leveling the ground, leveling everything with equanimity, then the six causes and the one effect, the causes and effects. The first one being recognizing all these beings, whether they're friend, enemy, and stranger. In the past, they've been my mother numberless times. And after that, after having some understanding of that, intensifying the feeling about them, developing an affection for them by recognizing their kindness, how they've helped us in numberless ways as having been my mother. More comprehensive way of understanding that is how they've been kind even when they weren't mother, when they delivered the milk and made the highways and paid the salaries and so forth. Then Dugna Bula Sewe Mashindu. There you go. That's nice. I seek your, well, the English actually starts from that, like that of a loving mother for her precious child. Dukwe Bula, Bu means child, infant, baby. Dukpa means so pretty, so nice. What does it say here? Precious. The word is not precious, but dukpa means, very beautiful child. So this is talking about the next cause, recognizing sentient beings as mother, remembering their kindness, and then developing a sense of repaying their kindness, which is perhaps implied by the words in the previous line. Here, Dukbe Bula Sewe Mashindu. Dukbe Bula is referring to the next stage after developing a sense of responsibility to repay their kindness. That's the third cause. Then to develop what's called Yongwe Jampa. Have you heard of that? Not just love, but affection Yongwa means the mind goes to it, going to the mind. So affectionate love. This is not fully qualified love, but just a sense of affection, having recognized that they've all been our mother, they've been kind again and again, and that this is something that we as a human being have a responsibility to repay. Then there's a sense when we see them, when we think about them, there's a sense of affection for them, a sense of being happy in their presence. I remember Lama Yeshe, when we were in India sometime, he would, I could hear him saying, mother sentient beings, mother sentient beings. And you've heard Atisha, with a sense of affection in his voice. Atisha, when he would look out of his window in Tibet, when he would see the cows grazing in the fields, his disciples could hear him saying, mother sentient beings. Just even whether they be animals, whether they be politicians, whether they be crooks, all of them have been our mother. And Nyamdak, destitute now, in dire straits, ordinary people don't recognize them as having been kind or having been our mother. This is something that we have to cultivate. So Dukbe Bula Sewe, Sewa here they translate as like that of a loving mother for her precious child. But in Tibetan, the word Dukbe Bul comes first, the precious child. This is talking about affectionate love. Sewa is another synonym for Ningje, or compassion. You might say mercy or compassion. Like Lama Tsongkhapa's mantra, Migme Sewe Terchen Chenrezi. Migme Sewe, Sewa, the same Sewa as in this verse here. So this is talking about the next cause. So recognizing sentient beings has been mother, recalling their kindness, developing a responsibility to repay that kindness, affectionate love, then compassion, great compassion. So a mother has compassion for their beautiful child. So the beautiful child part refers to developing a sense of affectionate love for them. And sewa, rather than translating it as loving mother, a merciful mother, synonym of compassion, because the word compassion comes in the next line, Mingje. Developing a sense of compassion for them, like a mother would be very happy to take on the suffering of their child. Could we develop that kind of affection for sentient beings, going beyond just affection for them, really a feeling of mercy, wanting to alleviate their suffering, wishing that they would be free of that suffering, even the enemies, the evil people of the world, cows, rats. I don't think the COVID virus is a sentient being, but if it were, we would have to be able to have compassion for it also. I think we would say generally viruses are not sentient beings. Dukbe bula sewe mashindu. So like a merciful mother for her beautiful child. Chomin ningje kepa jingilo. Grant me blessings to develop. Chumin here it says, what does it say here? Effortless compassion. Chumin means non-artificial, not constructed. So sometimes we have to develop compassion in our meditation, that's constructed out of effort, thinking, oh, they're worthy to be to be, to wish them to be free of suffering because they've been our mother numberless times and so forth. Once one is trained in compassion again and again, one doesn't have to do that in that artificial way, constructing it by reasoning and so forth. It comes naturally. So Chumin doesn't actually mean effortless. There might be some other better words, so non-artificial, not constructed. Effortless has the general sense. So this verse is talking about the causes to develop compassion through the methods of 7 cause and effect method. It's only gone up to compassion. Subsequently, the other cause, the next cause after compassion is what's called Laksam, the exceptional thought. That's not mentioned here. That's an extension of compassion where you think, I myself must take the responsibility to alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings. That's the 6th cause of bodhicitta. Because from that thought, then one thinks, how can I ensure that they be free? What do I have to do? I have to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. That's the 7th element of the 7 elements of cause and effect. Okay. So I hope that's clear. It seems pretty clear. Let's go on to the next verse. We can come back to this in a second. Oh, I see in the meditation handbook, it does mention meditate on Asanga's technique of 6 causes and 1 effect. I don't think that's necessarily, Asanga was someone who certainly placed it out, wrote it out in some of his texts, but it's not something that he developed. It comes from the Buddha to Buddha Maitreya on the method side. So now the next verse is, your text says, developing equanimity between self and others. So in Ngultru Dharmabhadra's text, he says, Dakshin Nyamje Gomsul Lasum. So the way to meditate on equalizing and exchanging. Nyamje, here it just, your thing says just developing equanimity between self and others. The main outline is how to meditate on equalizing and exchanging self and others. And the first, that has 3 outlines. The first of that is the way to meditate on equalizing self and others. Now, this is different than the equanimity meditation I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. That's a prelude to the 7 elements of cause and effect. That was equalizing friend, enemy, and stranger. Now, this is another kind of equanimity. This is an equanimity between oneself and others. Generally, and this is also a prelude to being able to actually cherish others in the same way that equanimity of friend, enemy, and strangers was a prelude to be able to develop affection for all of them equally. It's said that once in the morning in the desert, at dawn, when the sun is just rising, it illuminates all the land equally. And then as it begins to rise in the sky, the heat on the land can or does rise equally. So the example there is that once, if you've equalized friend, enemy, and stranger, and then you try to develop affection, you can do it equally for everyone. If you don't have that prelude, that cause, that preliminary practice of equanimity before the 7 elements of cause and effect, you can imagine you're developing affection for your friends, maybe even strangers, but enemies more difficult because you haven't equalized them. That all sentient beings have been our mother, have been enemies, they've been strangers, equal number of times in the past. So here now, this equanimity between self and others, this is different than equalizing friend, enemy, and stranger. This is equalizing yourself and others in terms of cherishing. Generally, if there's something to be gained, our basic instinct is what we call self-cherishing thought, self-cherishing attitude, rang chenzin gilo. Rang is one of the words that can mean self, oneself. Che means precious. Zin means hold. To hold oneself is precious. Rang chenzin gilo. Lo means attitude. Rang chenzin gilo. Generally, we don't, those that we kind of identify with, our friends, those that we have some expectation from, our lovers, our family, those people we can cherish to a certain degree, but even in the final analysis, generally, most people will still opt to cherish themselves even over their friends and family. We consider it heroic in the world when someone is willing to give up their own happiness for the sake of others. So here, Dugnal Tamo Samyang Midoshing. What is this? Here the phonetics is T-H-R-O. It's actually ta. There's really not much of an H. It's sort of maybe an aspirated H, but you don't really hear the R so much. Tamo. Tamo means subtle. Dugnal means suffering. So Dugnal Tamo Samyang Midoshing, not desiring even, sang, yang, even the merest subtle suffering. No one wants to experience even the subtlest suffering. What does it say? None of us wishes for even the slightest of sufferings. Dela namyang choshe mebani. Dewa means pleasure. Namyang means never. Chokshe mebani. Chokshe means content or satisfied, to no satisfaction. Mepani, Dugnal Tamo Samyang Midoshing, not desiring even the subtlest suffering, not satisfied with any happiness. So what does that mean? You might think, oh, come on, I'm satisfied with happiness. This is referring to one of the basic natures of cyclic existence, that there is no satisfaction to be found in cyclic existence. One of the general sufferings, when we talk about the 6 sufferings, have you heard of the 8 sufferings, the 6 sufferings, the 3 kinds of suffering? So the 6 sufferings, uncertainty, lack of satisfaction, that's talking about that. There's nothing in cyclic existence that by indulging in any kind of pleasure that you can be satisfied so that you never seek it again. Generally we seek out things when we feel some need for them. And like if you need like me, my stracciatella ice cream, I joke sometimes, it's one Italian gelato that I have a great affection for. Maybe chocolate chip will also do, but stracciatella is something special. You might think that by eating your favorite food or indulging in, emotional or physical attraction to others, physical embrace, and so forth, that you satisfy some need. But that satisfaction is not real satisfaction, because you're going to need it again later. And indulging in those pleasures kind of primes the pump for more desire for that in the future. Dela namyang choshe mebani. Here it says, never content with the happiness we have. Well, never content. It's the very nature of cyclic existence that no sentient being can find satisfaction in any happiness. You have to understand what that means, that's the very nature of cyclic existence. Dagdang shenla kepa yomen she. The she at the end kind of means almost like quotation marks. Dak is oneself, shen means others, dakdang shen, self and others. With respect to self and others, kepa yomen, there is no difference. So there's no difference between myself and others, as you have there. There's no satisfaction in, none of us desire even the slightest of sufferings. Is that true? Does anyone desire suffering? No. Well, you might. It's the very demarcation of suffering that we don't desire it, and we're never capable of being satisfied with any kind of pleasure. So knowing that, shende gawa kepa jingilob. Here it says, realizing this, I seek your blessings that I might generate joy for the happiness of others. So this is good. So I've seen some other translations where it incorrectly said generate happiness for others. So this is shende, that means others' happiness. May I develop joy in the happiness of others. This is this is an interesting philosophical point. Maybe some of you have thought about this. Have you heard, the practice of rejoicing in the 7 limbs? If this was a class, I'd ask one of you, or I'd ask the class, what does rejoicing mean? So is this the 7-limb rejoicing, to develop joy in the happiness of others? I don't know. It's some TV program I watched, Mr. Monk. I don't think so. Maybe some people, when you say rejoice, you talk about generally when in the 7 limbs of rejoicing, the rejoicing, which is one of the 7 limbs, that actually means rejoicing in the causes of happiness that others create. Because in so doing, in feeling joy that others are creating virtue or have created virtue, you create the same amount of karma if they're of equal spiritual development to yourself. If you rejoice in the virtuous actions of holy beings higher than yourself, you create some portion of their virtue. That even you don't do that, just rejoicing in that, thinking how wonderful that is that they've done that. Rejoicing in those in the virtuous actions of those that are of a lower spiritual attainment than yourself, you create less virtue than them, but you still, you create more virtue than them, those that are lower than yourself. So you've heard the story of the beggar who had come to on the gates when the one wealthy family was offering food, banquet to the Buddha and his disciples. And the king was, the patron of this was very self-important. And after the banquet, the king asked the Buddha to dedicate his merits, which really, you have to dedicate your own merits, but it was kind of like a self-congratulatory kind of statement. But the Buddha said, no, you haven't created that much merit. The person outside the fence, the beggar who's looking at this banquet, rejoicing in the great deed that you have done, has created more merit than you out of their, heartfelt wish. Your giving of this banquet has been done out of attachment to reputation and so forth. So that's the sense of rejoicing in the seven limbs. Sometimes I think even Lama Zopa Rinpoche says that rejoicing in the happiness or causes of happiness, but I would debate respectfully with Rinpoche if that's indeed what he said, that the rejoicing in the happiness of others, feeling joy in the happiness of others, is not the seven limb rejoicing. It is what is called great love. This is, when we talk about what is compassion? Compassion is the desire for others to be free of suffering. Love is the wish that they be conjoined with happiness. So this is the rejoicing, but not the seven, from my point of view. Maybe you can debate amongst yourselves or with Ken Rinpoche when he returns, or with the Venerable Sangye Khandro, who I saw is teaching some courses, whether that's called the seven limb rejoicing. It creates a virtuous karma, but not in the same way that rejoicing in the virtuous actions of others. Shende gawa keba jingiro. So this is, as Mutu Dharma Bhadra says also here, this is the Jampa Chempo, Maha Maitre, the great love. So how can that be? Didn't love in the seven methods of cause and effect, didn't love come before compassion? No, that was affectionate love. That wasn't fully qualified love. That was just a feeling of affection towards sentient beings. And as a result of that, one was able to generate great compassion. If you have great compassion, you can generate great love. And if you have great love, you can generate great compassion. So this is talking about the first step in the alternate method to develop bodhicitta, which is the equalizing and exchanging self and others. So this is the prelude to being able to exchange oneself for others, exchange your attitude of cherishing. Right now, we cherish ourselves and to a certain extent, or to a large extent, disregard the happiness of others, their aims, their welfare. If we're a responsible person, a good person, we try to help as much as we can, but when it comes down to the end, to the final point, it's ourself that's most important. That's called self-cherishing. So to be able to equalize our sense of importance, myself and others, this is the first step of equalizing our attitude. So to train in this again and again, to train in the fact that there's no difference between myself and others. So you might, if you're like me, you might be bemused. Why is this a reason why I can feel that others' happiness is as important as my own? If you have an insight into emptiness, and you see that there is or you've been told at least, or you have some intuition or understanding that there's no inherently existent self, that the self that I designate onto my own aggregates, that's just the conventional self. And that's not the one that when we talk about cherishing ourself, or when we talk about self-grasping, that's not the self that we're referring to, that just merely imputed self. What we're talking about is a misapprehension of a self that seems to be appearing there, seems to be existing from its own side. So having some understanding of selflessness, you can understand that what's the difference between myself and others? There's no real inherent difference. We are equal in the sense that we all desire happiness. We all want to be free of suffering. You've heard His Holiness the Dalai Lama mention that again and again. So this is that first step. So as you have meditated on the previous verse on the causes to develop compassion through the 7 causes and effect. It didn't go beyond that. It didn't go beyond great compassion. Now here it's also integrating in the meditation on equanimity. I wish I could see your faces. See if you're anyone to say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Maybe not. Okay, anyway, let me just introduce the next verse, which I'll use as a transition and the next talk also. And that is here, the second of the three outlines about the way to meditate on equalizing and exchanging self and others. This is Daksen Jewe Gomsu La Shi, the way to meditate on exchanging self and others. It has 4 outlines. This is the first one is Dakshezin Gi Kyun, the faults of cherishing oneself. As you have here, contemplating the faults of self-cherishing. So once we've equalized the sense of cherishing, the importance of oneself and others, that is, when we say cherishing, it means to hold important, okay, to cherish, like you cherish your iPhone, or you cherish your Mercedes, or you cherish yourself, you hold it as important. So this one says, Rangni chepa zimpe chongne di, midu dugna kepe gyurtongne, lelandela kongdu sunchete, dagzin donchen jompa jingilo. So Rangni chepa zimpe, hold to, this chepa doesn't mean large, it means dear, to hold as dear, to cherish. So zinpa means to hold. Rangni chepa zinpe chongne di. Chongne, ne means disease, sickness. Chong means chronic. Something like something that you can't get rid of. That doesn't mean epidemic, like we have now, the COVID epidemic, but it means a disease that is long-lasting. You might be able to take something that eliminates the symptoms, but if you stop taking that medicine because the root cause is still there, the chronic disease will come back again. You need to find the real cure to that. Rangni chepa simpe chongne di. This chronic disease of self-cherishing. Mido dugnal kepe gyurtongne. Mido dugnal is a phrase that comes a couple of times in the Lama Chopa. Mido means not desired, undesired. Dugnao means suffering. Kepe means generating. Gyur is cause. Tong means seeing. Having seen that this chronic disease of self-cherishing is the cause that produces undesired suffering. So is there any suffering that's desired? I had debate with some of my Dharma friends. What's the implication here? Undesired suffering. Is there some suffering that's desired? What do you think? Oh, I wish I could hear you. Is the moderator, can I hear the moderator? Is there any suffering that's desired? Well, yeah. Remember we talk about the three kinds of suffering. Suffering of suffering, changeable suffering, pervasive all compounding suffering. So changeable suffering, we desire, right? The self-cherishing thought, self-cherishing attitude is the cause that gives rise to undesired suffering, suffering of suffering. The desirable suffering, changeable suffering, maybe even, just calm, being blah, all pervasive suffering we don't recognize also. So it's not so much that that's undesired to us ordinary beings. It's undesirable to an Arya being and to a Dharma practitioner. Even changeable suffering is not desirable, although most of us are in the situation where we would very gladly have changeable suffering. That means happiness, samsaric happiness, right? Being praised, having good tasting food, winning the lottery, having friends that love us, having wealth, power, and so forth. The worldly dharmas, right? So having seen that this chronic disease of self-cherishing is the cause that gives rise to undesirable suffering, to suffering, right? Just suffering of suffering. Leylan Dela. Leylan means to blame. So to send out, having blamed it, Kyondu Zungwa. Kongzin, maybe when you studied mind and mental factors, is when you hold a grudge, right? So first, blaming this, recognizing that the self-cherishing thought is like a chronic disease that gives rise to undesired suffering. And we'll expound upon that a little bit today and next time. Once you've seen that, then you can blame that when you have suffering, when you lose something, when you are admonished by others, when you feel some pain yourself. You can think, if I recognize this, all of this suffering has come about because of creating negative karma. Where did the negative karma come about? From myself. There's no way that someone else's negative karma can ripen on me. I've created the karma to experience the suffering. And the motivating factor when we created negative karma is invariably the self-cherishing thought, self-cherishing attitude. Wanting to have nice things, we're willing to maybe to cheat, to lie, to steal, so forth, engage in negative activities, thinking of my own pleasure. So first, blaming, Leylan means, here it says, perceiving this, I seek your blessings to blame, begrudge. So, or to hold a grudge, begrudge. You might think, in Kongdu Zinba, also, here the tense is changed, so it's Kongdu Zung. Kongzum can also mean vengeance or to seek retribution and so forth. In the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, Shantideva says, in general, that an attitude of seeking retribution or to avenge something is a negative state of mind. If there is anything that is, anytime that that's worthy, it's taking the self-cherishing thought or the self-grasping as the object that you wish to eliminate, right? That you wish to retaliate against. You hold a grudge against it. So many of us, we actually enshrine our self-cherishing attitude. We think of it as something that protects us, that's what gives us the clever, that engenders cleverness to bring about some happiness, that gives us the will to steal or to subjugate others to our own desire, whether it be sexually or fiscally or in whatever way, to that self-cherishing thought we think of as our friend. Here is what we're trying to understand it, not as a friend, but as an enemy. And not just a temporary enemy, it's like a chronic disease. So perceiving this, I seek your blessings to blame, begrudge, and destroy the monstrous demon of selfishness. Dagzin Donchen Chompa Jingilob. Well, monstrous, I don't know where the monster is. The Dongchen, Don means demon, like spirit. This Don, the way that it's spelled in Tibetan. Chen means great, the great demon of self-grasping. So in the beginning of the sentence, we're talking about Rang Chenzen Gilo, self-cherishing attitude. And here it's saying, having seen how the self-cherishing attitude, this chronic disease of self-cherishing, is the cause that gives rise to all undesired suffering. And you have to contemplate this. I remember having done a retreat in Holland after teaching there one time at a Benedictine monastery. I didn't give the retreat. I did the retreat at the monastery. There was a friend of the center's who was the abbot of the monastery. He was sympathetic to Buddhism. In fact, he had a statue, I think that was given to him by Bede Griffiths, this famous Christian missionary in India. And it showed Buddha sitting, showed Christ sitting in the meditation posture, meditating Christ. So he was sympathetic to Buddhism, the abbot, and I did meditation there on these kind of verses, and especially on the disadvantages, the faults of the self-cherishing mind. Thinking again and again, any kind of suffering, any humiliation we've had, the inability to do something, the failures that we've had in life, all have come about because of our negative karma in past lives. All of that negative karma was, if you search back, it was all attributable to the existence of the self-cherishing attitude in our own mind at that time that caused us to create that negative karma that we're experiencing the results of now. So perceiving this, I seek your blessings to blame, begrudge, and destroy the great demon of self-grasping. So a question comes up. Well, before we're talking about self-cherishing, now we're talking about self-grasping. You know the difference, right? Self-grasping is a particular kind of ignorance that to which appears an inherently existent self, which is illusory, doesn't really exist, and we grasp on it as being true. As a result of that, we develop a sense of self-cherishing. Once we have the sense of a self that really exists, we want we hold it as dear because we associate with it to the detriment of others. But notice how this line says, Dagsin Donchen, great demon of self-cherishing. So here's an interesting point. When we talk about chronic diseases in Tibet, we believe that Tibetans believed, and some simple people believe, also other people believe, that these kind of chronic diseases are the result of spirits, some demons. When we talk about demon, we talk about some spirit. So the demon is the cause of the chronic disease. If you can pacify the demon, sometimes you can get rid of the chronic disease. This is talking about just ordinary diseases in the world. It's not all diseases that are caused by demons, but there are, from Tibetan medical science point of view, some diseases are the result of evil spirits. And if you can placate that demon, or with wrathful means destroy that demon, cause it to leave, the chronic disease can be cured. So here the analogy is that the self-grasping is the demon that causes the chronic disease of self-cherishing. I think that's quite revealing. That's quite interesting. If that seems too subtle for you, you could just think that this Dagsin in the last line, or as John Landau's translation, or the FPMT translation, when we talk about selfishness, that's the same as self-cherishing, but I think they're meant to be two different things. Rangni chepa zimpe jonedi, midudugna kepe gyurtone. Having seen that this chronic disease of self-cherishing is the cause that gives rise to all suffering, all the undesired suffering. Having seen that, may I blame it? That's the thing. In the 7-point training of the mind, I think Venerable Sangha is teaching you, one of the verses is to place the blame on one thing. If it hasn't come up, it will come up in the coming verses. To place the blame, not to place the blame on other people, or the government, or bad luck or something. Put the blame of everything that's undesired, all undesired suffering, on the self-cherishing thought, which is like a chronic disease. And if you don't get rid of it, understanding that if you don't get rid of it, a chronic disease, it's going to flare up again and again. So you want to destroy the cause of it. In this case, sort of like in the medical lore, thinking that the chronic disease has come about because of some spirit, some demon. That's the cause of the chronic disease of self-cherishing. What's the cause of self-cherishing? Self-grasping. So this has a dual purpose, this verse of talking about ultimately, in order to eliminate self-cherishing, you have to reach the 8th bhumi of a bodhisattva, whereupon the last visages of self-grasping are destroyed. You've ceased. You've caused the cessation of all self-grasping, and as a result, the last causes of this demon-like self-grasping no longer can create any self-cherishing. Generally, we say, when you develop, sometimes people think when you develop bodhicitta, you no longer have self-cherishing, but it's not really eliminated until much longer, because there's still some little visages of that. And the Buddhas even appear to the bodhisattvas on the higher levels, reminding them to work for the welfare of others, while there's still some chance that self-cherishing can arise. Okay. So let's take a pause, see if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask. Today we've done 2 verses, and the third verse we did also, but I'll use that as a transition next time. Also go over that again next time. Any questions so far about what we've talked about? I'm not sure. I think there's some procedure where there's some button you press. I don't know how to do it myself, to raise your hand so the moderator can call on you or something. Is that right, moderator?
Yes. For those who want to, yeah, we have Sarah here.
Hi. Good evening in North Carolina, and good morning to everybody in Singapore. I have a question about the generating compassion, and I understand the process of imagining that all sentient beings are or have been our mothers, but it's always going in that direction. And I was wondering, am I also, and have I also been their mothers as well in past lives? So is it both ways? Am I also the mother of all sentient beings? Thank you very much.
Yes, it sounds like what was Saddam Hussein said, the mother of all wars or something like that. The mother of all sentient beings. Yeah, we've been their mother, and there may be some times when we would, that might be useful to think of that. But in terms of developing a sense of affection towards sentient beings, we want to recall how they've been kind. So in the 7 points of 7 elements of cause and effect, the particular method that's used to develop affectionate love is by understanding that all sentient beings have been our mother, how they've been kind, and feeling a sense of responsibility toward them, just like families feel responsibility for their elders in the family, for their mom and dad as they grow old. We don't just ignore them because we remember they raised us, they educated us, they gave us enjoyments, they gave us this body and so forth, and we feel a responsibility to repay their kindness. So to recognize how you have been their mother may be tangentially useful in some situations, but that's not the main thrust here. Although it is definitely, as you notice, it is definitely true. We have been, was that someone say something? I heard something in the background. Maybe that was someone in your room talking or something. So yeah, the main thing here is to recognize how all sentient beings have been our mother. In terms of equalizing self and others, the second method to develop bodhicitta, that is more from the wisdom side, that where we start with equalizing ourself and others, there the way to develop affectionate love is more general, that sentient beings have been kind even when they weren't our mother, when they were our enemies, because they gave us the opportunity to practice patience. In the human realm, someone who is our enemy gives us the chance to experience the ripening of negative karma in this life, in something small, some humiliation or some pain or some loss of wealth or whatever, having your things stolen or someone doesn't pay you or whatever. And certainly strangers have been kind. As I mentioned earlier, that they delivered the milk. This was an old thing. In America, they used to deliver the milk also. I think in England, maybe they still do. I don't know, maybe they don't. People that build the roads, people that build the infrastructure, they do it out of self-cherishing thought, but they benefit us. And important element there in developing affection for others in this more comprehensive way is to recognize that The kindness of others doesn't presuppose that they intend to be kind. They are kind whether they intend to be kind or not. They're kind to us if they benefit us, whether they intended to benefit us or not. So the financial system that comes about, that we work and someone gives us pay, we benefit from that. So those sentient beings and the people, even they do it, that perpetuate the monetary system, might be done completely out of self-interest and maybe even marginalizing ourselves. We benefit to some degree, and so they're kind. So thinking in ways like that is a way to develop a deeper sense of affection, especially in the second method to develop bodhicitta. Does that help at all? I see Chun Hao's name in the middle of my screen. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We have Faye next on the asking a question. Faye,
Hello,
you can
Faith.
unmute yourself.
Hello, Faith.
Hi, Venerable George. I had two questions. One was just to clarify on the difference between self-cherishing and self-grasping. So self-grasping, it sounds like it takes out emptiness from the self, right? Meaning that we don't rely on others and we can stand on our own and that there's no emptiness, right? Is that what you meant by self-grasping versus self-cherishing? Is when...
So there's a relationship between self-grasping and emptiness, but self-grasping means this. It's the basic kind of ignorance we have that perpetuates cyclic existence. Once you, like say the arhats, the practitioners that cultivate the Theravada path, the main obstacle that they overcome to achieve liberation from samsara, to achieve nirvana, is eliminating the self-grasping. Self-grasping is a kind of ignorance. Sometimes the particular variation of it, we sometimes call the wrong view of the transitory collection, viewing the collection of the five aggregates, which are all changing in time, as being an inherently existing self. So the practitioners of the Theravada, that's the main thing that they recognize: selflessness of persons. To eliminate selflessness means recognizing that there's no self of persons. Sometimes there can be grosser forms of that that the realization of which will not cause you to escape from cyclic existence, but make your life much more easier and much more spiritual. And in the final analysis, what selflessness means, the understanding that the state of mind that's grasping to a self as inherently existing, inherently existent, that is an erroneous mind, that's an ignorance, and that we are actually devoid of that, of such a self that our mind is believing. Like the example I've given sometime, the term, what do we call it? The boogeyman. The boogeyman in the West, I don't know if what you say in Singapore or in Chinese culture, but like when you're a little kid, there's something scary, and your older brothers or sisters or your friends that want to scare you, they say, "Oh, that's the boogeyman. That's the creaking of the floor, the lightning or whatever." Your mind, if your mind believes that there's something there that doesn't really exist, you can be in a state of fear and have suffering as a result of that. Once you recognize that there's no malevolent force out there, boogeyman, you're free from that fear. That's kind of like liberation, you might say. So understanding that the self-grasping mind is erroneous, that there is no self in the way that mind imagines. not just that it imagines, that it actually adheres to and believes in, that there's no such self, that's also called realization of emptiness, the emptiness of the self. That means that the self that appears to your mind is somehow really there from its own side, not depending on causes and conditions or anything else, parts, that self doesn't exist at all, like the boogeyman. So as a result of having that ignorance, that self-grasping, once you believe in the self, and we have since beginningless time, so it's not like once, since we have believed in the self since beginningless time, we have always had the self-cherishing thought that wants to hold it as more important. Now, the arhats that follow the culmination of the Theravada path, they eliminate the self-grasping, but they have never eliminated the self-cherishing. So remember in that verse before I said that the chronic disease of self-grasping, self-cherishing is caused by the great demon of self-grasping. Self-cherishing is caused by self-cherishing is caused by self-grasping. But once you eliminate if you just eliminate the self-grasping, there's still a residue of that self-cherishing in the mind of a Theravada practitioner who has not actively sought to eliminate the self-cherishing thought. So they still seek their own liberation, their own nirvana, rather than prolonging their existence and cyclic existence to achieve enlightenment for the sake of others. They give that up. They want to just escape, get out of here, like the famous rock and roll song of many decades ago, I've got to get out of this place. I've got to get out of this place if it's the last thing I ever do. That's kind of like the Theravada motto, without considering we've got to get out of this place, thinking I've got to get out of this place. So I hope that helps a little. I hope I haven't made it more complicated.
We have Violet's next on the.
Hi, Violet.
Yeah, Violet, can unmute yourself?
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, Venerable George. I have this thinking that when we see someone who is doing very evil things, just like Hitler's or Donald Trump, I can't.
Yeah.
We can't generate this such a thought that in the past that he have been so kind to me as a mother. But if I think the other way, in a sense that I have been a mother of this person, which is so horrible now. And if I take up the responsibility of thinking that, in the past when I'm a mother, how bad I have treated him that causing him to have this behavior now. Will this sort of contemplation help me in my meditations?
I'm not sure what exactly, how you're thinking. As I mentioned unless it was you before, some other person asked about the utility or whether we can recognize that we have been everyone's mother. I think that is true, that we have been their mother. We've been Donald Trump's mother sometime when he was not Donald Trump, right? He might have been
correct.
a girl, I might have been a mommy chicken and he was a baby chicken.
Correct.
But we don't, in so doing, we might not be able to recognize that we caused his bad behavior now, something that we did to him. Oh, it's my fault. It's turned out that way. I've never heard that used. Certainly, in our interaction with sentient beings in this life and past lives, when we acted out of self-cherishing, not necessarily as mother, because mother often gives up her own self-interest for the sake of the baby. But if we've been a bad influence on others in the past, we can kind of feel a certain responsibility. Yeah, we might have left some imprint in their mind for their behavior, but that's very difficult to seek out. The Buddha did see with his omniscient mind that all sentient beings have been our mother numberless times, and over infinite, limitless lives that each being has been our mother, not just once, not twice, not a million times, but numberless times. Over those lives, they have given us our bodies, enjoyment, education, pleasures, helped us in so many different ways. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I noticed in his teaching the other night, he was mentioning also how this is a basic trait of living beings, that there is the parent-child relationship is something that that shows the kindness. We're able to, in that kind of intimate relationship, or in the relationship of husband and wife, or people who love one another, one is able to give up one's own self-interest to a certain degree, but that's not unbiased. That's not, that has to be sort of preceded by a sense of equanimity, so that you can feel that same love toward all sentient beings. Okay. So maybe time for one more question?
Thank you.
Yeah, we have Faye got, I think still need some clarification for, Faye, you can continue. Yeah.
Hi, Faye.
Hi, Venerable George again. A separate question, like I'm just wondering for self-cherishing, what about, say we want to work on something on ourselves, like if we want to improve a certain skill that we're doing, or we want to, when people say work on ourselves, is that considered self-cherishing? Like, say if I want to get better at painting, I don't know, I'm just making an example, or I want to learn this new skill or get better in my career, is that self-cherishing? Is that?
Well, it depends. Bodhisattvas also, who have eliminated self-cherishing to a great degree, they still do worldly things. They have certain things that bring them pleasure, and they use as relief. They engage in certain activities, say to make money, but they use that money for the benefit of others. So if whatever hobbies you have or things that bring you pleasure, you can utilize to bring pleasure and understanding to others, then it can become an antidote to self-cherishing. If it's just something that you do in order to become famous, like a rock and roll singer or a famous artist that others are going to praise, and you're reveling in that praise, then that would not be the best, that would not be a Dharma use of that activity. It would be just a worldly, mundane, what we say, the worldly dharmas. The dharma is a word that means that which holds you up. That, the holy dharma is that which holds you up from suffering. Worldly dharmas is what the world thinks holds them up from suffering. Praise and pleasure of the senses.
So it depends on the motivation of that.
Depends on the motivation, yeah. So if you were, I remember at Kopan Monastery once, there was a boy who told Lama Yeshe after the end of the course, he said, "Lama, I draw comics for a profession. And I really enjoyed what you said in this course, but I don't know if I can continue doing this." And Lama said, "Oh yes, you can draw comics that, have some meaning to them, some Dharma meaning, showing impermanence, or showing how others have been kind to us in the past and how it's possible to change and so forth. So if there's a way that you can use your interests that bring you pleasure, if there's a way that you can use them to benefit others, that's the optimal way to, even the lamas, you know, they have interests. They like to do certain things. Geshe Tekchok, who passed away some years ago, who was the abbot of Sera Monastery, when he was teaching us at Manjushri Institute many years ago, in the evenings, a couple times a week, he would like to watch boxing. You know, the physical sport where the people are punching one another. So maybe sometimes there's certain things, certain activities that we don't immediately, we're not able to immediately utilize to benefit others, but they relax those activities, you know, like taking a walk in the park, or, you know, seeing the sunset, or watching a movie or something like that. It relaxes us so that we can then, having relaxed, we can engage in enthusiastic perseverance again. In fact, one of the divisions of enthusiastic perseverance is the enthusiastic perseverance of rest. So, you know, it doesn't mean just sleeping rest, but, you know, just relaxing, doing something that's enjoyable. So then you can get back to your practice of the Dharma, helping others, study, and so forth.
Okay, thank you so much. Really
Thank
helpful.
you. Okay, so that's about an hour and a half. And I'm not sure. I thought there was going to be another teaching by His Holiness. Is it going on now? This weekend? Is Chan Hao there? Anyway, let's quit here. And we'll continue next week with the following verses. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good evening, or good morning.
Good evening. Good evening. Bye.
Yeah, take care.